The story begins with a clandestine war already in motion, a conflict waged in the shadows long before the protagonist enters the fray. In the early 1970s, the Israeli intelligence agency, known simply as the Institute, finds itself locked in a violent struggle against Palestinian militants operating across Europe. Following the massacre of Israeli athletes at the Munich Olympics, the agency launches a campaign of retribution, targeting the leadership of Black September. This secret war sets the stage for a specific, high-stakes plot in January 1973, aimed at the Israeli Prime Minister, Golda Meir. Intelligence reports filter into the agency suggesting a major operation is brewing, though the specifics remain opaque. A reliable source in London, a Palestinian student named Akbar who occasionally sells information, contacts the agency with news of a forthcoming strike. He travels to Paris and then to Rome, tracked by agency operatives who bungle the surveillance at a critical moment in an airport cafeteria, allowing a Palestinian spotter to realize Akbar has been compromised. Despite this breach, the militants do not abort their mission. Instead, they use the compromised agent to feed false information to the Israelis, diverting their attention to a staged attack on the Israeli embassy in Bangkok. The agency falls for the ruse, believing the threat has passed, but the head of the Milan station, Shai Kauly, remains skeptical. His meticulous nature leads him to distrust the convenient resolution in Thailand. While the agency relaxes, the militant leader known as the Red Prince orchestrates a plan to shoot down the Prime Minister's plane as it arrives in Rome for a meeting with the Pope. He procures Russian-made Strella heat-seeking missiles from training camps in Yugoslavia. To move the weapons into Italy, the plotters hire unsuspecting German boaters to ferry the cargo across the Adriatic to Bari, after which the smugglers are murdered to ensure their silence. The missiles are driven to Rome and hidden in an apartment. The plot nears fruition as the Prime Minister's visit approaches. Kauly's breakthrough comes from an interception in Brussels, where a listening device in a prostitute's apartment records a cryptic instruction to clear a Rome apartment and take the 14 cakes. Realizing this refers to missiles, Kauly mobilizes his team. He bypasses the obstructed chain of command in Rome and locates the empty apartment, finding scraps of paper that confirm the presence of Strella missiles. With the Prime Minister en route, a desperate search ensues around the Fiumicino airport. The agency teams scour the perimeter, eventually locating a team of militants in the fields. A firefight erupts, and one captured militant reveals under severe interrogation that the attack is imminent. He mocks his captors, claiming it is too late. Kauly refuses to accept defeat. As the Prime Minister's plane enters its final approach, a security officer spots a food vendor's cart parked in a suspicious location near the flight path. Noticing smoke rising from a vent that does not match the others, he realizes the missiles are concealed inside. He rams his vehicle into the cart, overturning it and trapping the gunman beneath just as the plane lands safely. The catastrophe is averted, but the event underscores the ruthless, high-stakes environment that defines the agency's existence. The narrative shifts to Paris in the mid-1970s, where the agency continues its war against terror networks, specifically targeting a Venezuelan revolutionary known as Carlos. The agency recruits a liaison between Carlos and the militants, a man named Moukharbel, by confronting him in a London hotel room. Moukharbel agrees to provide information on his superiors to ensure his own survival. He leads the agency to Mohammed Boudia, a key organizer in Paris. The agency tracks Boudia's movements, noting his habit of checking his vehicle for explosives. To circumvent his precautions, operatives plant a pressure-activated mine inside the driver's seat of his car. The device detonates when Boudia sits down, killing him instantly. Following Boudia's death, Carlos assumes control of the European network. The agency attempts to trap him by using Moukharbel to lure French police to a party where Carlos is present. The plan is for the police to detain Carlos for questioning, thereby neutralizing him without direct Israeli involvement. However, the operation goes disastrously wrong. When the police enter the apartment, Carlos feigns cooperation before suddenly producing a weapon. He kills the police officers and executes Moukharbel on the spot for his betrayal, then escapes. The incident leaves the agency with a bitter lesson about the unpredictability of their targets and the high cost of relying on foreign law enforcement. By the late 1970s, the agency turns its focus to a new strategic threat, the construction of a nuclear reactor in Iraq. The French government agrees to supply the technology and the enriched uranium, dismissing Israeli concerns that the facility will be used to manufacture weapons. The agency launches Operation Sphinx to halt the project. The operation begins with the recruitment of an Iraqi scientist, Butrus Eben Halim, who is working on the reactor project in France. The recruitment is a textbook example of the agency's patient, psychological approach. Operatives identify Halim as a vulnerable target, lonely, married but childless, and living a dreary life in a Paris suburb. They manufacture a chance meeting at a bus stop, where an operative posing as a wealthy Englishman named Jack Donovan offers Halim a ride in a Ferrari. Over several weeks, Donovan cultivates a friendship with Halim, introducing him to a world of luxury, fine dining, and women. He carefully avoids discussing politics or work, letting Halim relax and enjoy the attention. Once the bond is established, Donovan introduces Halim to other associates who pose as businessmen interested in nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. They offer Halim lucrative consulting fees for information that seems harmless. Halim, seduced by the money and the lifestyle, begins providing technical details about the Iraqi reactor. When he eventually realizes he is dealing with intelligence agents, he panics. The operatives expertly manipulate his fear, posing as Americans who only want to verify that the reactor is peaceful. They reassure him that cooperation is his only safety. Halim provides crucial intelligence, including the layout of the facility and the shipping schedules for the reactor cores. Armed with this information, the agency launches a sabotage mission. In April 1979, a team of operatives infiltrates a hangar in France where the reactor cores are awaiting shipment. They plant explosive charges calculated to damage the equipment without causing a radioactive disaster. The explosion destroys 60% of the components, delaying the Iraqi program by months. However, the Iraqis persist, and the agency is forced to take darker measures. They target another key scientist, an Egyptian named Yahia El Meshad, who is spearheading the project. After failing to recruit him, operatives enter his hotel room in Paris and assassinate him. They also eliminate a French prostitute who had been with him, fearing she might talk to the police. These ruthless actions delay the nuclear timeline, but eventually, the agency concludes that covert sabotage is insufficient. The intelligence gathered by Halim and others ultimately guides a squadron of Israeli fighter jets in 1981, which bombed the reactor in Iraq into rubble, ending the threat completely. It is against this backdrop of secret wars, assassinations, and high-level sabotage that the narrative introduces Victor Ostrovsky. Born in Canada but raised in Israel, Victor grows up in a patriotic environment, imbued with the belief that his country is a besieged fortress requiring constant defense. He serves in the military police and later the Navy, distinguishing himself as an officer. His file catches the attention of the agency's recruiters, who are constantly trawling the military records for potential candidates. In 1979, Victor is summoned to a meeting at a military base. A recruiter vaguely describes a job that involves serving the country in a unique capacity. Victor is intrigued. He undergoes a series of preliminary interviews and psychological tests in clandestine locations, including private apartments and cafes. The process is opaque. He is never told explicitly what he is applying for, though he strongly suspects it is the institute. He passes the initial screenings but rejects the offer when he learns the job would require long absences from his family. The recruiters are persistent, harassing him and his wife with phone calls for months, but Victor stands firm, leaving the Navy to open a stained glass business. 3 years later, in 1982, the agency approaches him again. This time, the pitch is different. He is invited to the agency's headquarters in Tel Aviv, disguised as a commercial office building. The recruiter appeals to his sense of duty and adventure, positioning the agency as an elite family dedicated to saving Jews worldwide. Victor, now looking for a new challenge, agrees to re-enter the selection process. The testing regimen is grueling and designed to strip away a candidate's defenses. Victor is subjected to days of psychological exams, general knowledge questionnaires, and polygraph tests. He is instructed to keep his candidacy secret, even from his closest friends. The isolation serves to bind him closer to the agency. His wife is also interviewed at length to ensure she has the fortitude to be the spouse of an intelligence officer. Following the successful completion of these interviews, Victor is invited to the final selection phase, a punishing series of situational tests held at a country club hotel. He is one of 15 candidates, a diverse group including a psychologist and a woman, all vying for a handful of spots. They are stripped of their real identities and assigned aliases. The instructors, veteran field officers, observe them constantly, looking for creativity, memory, and the ability to lie convincingly. The tests are practical and intense. In one exercise, Victor is dropped in Tel Aviv with no money or identification and ordered to get onto the balcony of a specific third-floor apartment within minutes. He improvises a cover story about being a filmmaker scouting locations, charms the apartment owner, and appears on the balcony holding a glass of water as proof of his success. In another test, he must identify a person on a hotel guest list without arousing the clerk's suspicion. He executes the task by feigning confusion about a name, leaning over the counter to read the ledger upside down. The pressure mounts as the candidates are pushed to their physical and emotional limits. They are deprived of sleep and forced to perform surveillance tasks in the middle of the night. In a particularly harrowing test, Victor is picked up by men posing as police officers who accuse him of drug dealing. They interrogate him in a car, slap him, and verbally abuse him, trying to break his cover story. Victor maintains his persona as an artist, even when they strip him of his pants and leave him semi-naked on a busy street. He manages to retrieve his clothes and complete his assignment, earning high marks for his composure. Not all candidates survive the selection. Some crack under the pressure of the fake interrogations or fail to maintain their cover stories when challenged. A candidate who claims to be a Mossad agent during a police stop is immediately dismissed. The process is ruthless, designed to weed out anyone with a breaking point. After surviving the final selection battery, Victor is accepted into the training program. He is euphoric, believing he has joined the elite of the elite. He joins a small class of 12 recruits, referred to as cadets. They are transported to the academy, a secluded compound on a hill north of Tel Aviv, shielded from the public eye. The facility is stark and modern, with classrooms, living quarters, and a central recreational area. The commandant of the academy welcomes the new cadets with a speech that emphasizes their uniqueness. He tells them they are the chosen few, entrusted with the fate of the nation. He introduces the motto of the organization, by way of deception, "Thou shalt do war." The speech reinforces the messianic zeal that pervades the agency, framing their illegal activities as moral imperatives. Training begins immediately and covers the fundamental tradecraft of intelligence. The cadets are taught that security is paramount. They are instructed to never use the word Mossad, referring to it only as the office. They learn to lead double lives, lying to friends and family about their true work. The curriculum includes the structure of the agency's various departments, such as the Collection Division and the Political Action Division. The instructors, active field officers on rotation, teach through practical examples and brutal critiques. In one of the first lessons on personal security, the classroom is stormed by gunmen firing blanks. The cadets dive for cover while the instructors feign death. The lesson is immediate. In the field, there are no second chances. This concept of operational security, known by its Hebrew acronym APAM, becomes the religion of the course. The cadets learn to constantly check for surveillance, to sanitize their environments, and to trust no one. They spend weeks mastering the art of the report. The agency demands a specific, rigid format for all written communications. Every interaction, no matter how trivial, must be documented with precision. The cadets practice synthesizing vast amounts of information from newspapers and raw intelligence into concise summaries. They learn that information is the lifeblood of the organization, and without a record, an event effectively did not happen. As the weeks progress, the training moves to the streets of Tel Aviv. The cadets practice surveillance, learning to follow targets on foot and in vehicles without being detected. They learn the geography of the city intimately, using it as a game board for their exercises. They study the psychology of observation, learning to blend into a crowd and to use storefront reflections to check their backs. The camaraderie among the cadets grows, forged by the shared stress and the exclusive nature of their club. They form cliques and competitive rivalries. Victor falls in with a group that includes a religious student named Yossi and a French immigrant named Michel. They spend their off hours analyzing their instructors and comparing notes, trying to gain an edge. The curriculum expands to include cover building. The cadets learn to create detailed false identities, or legends, which they must maintain under interrogation. They are sent into the city to interact with civilians using these false personas. They practice the art of conversation, learning how to elicit information from strangers without asking direct questions. They frequent hotels and cafes, spinning elaborate lies to unsuspecting tourists and locals, testing their ability to manipulate social situations. Victor excels in these exercises, discovering a natural talent for improvisation. In one assignment, he enters a bank posing as a wealthy businessman returning from abroad. He manages to secure a meeting with the manager, charming him into revealing personal details and even receiving an invitation to the manager's home. The thrill of the deception is intoxicating. The cadets begin to view the civilian population not as people, but as targets and potential assets. The training also covers the technical aspects of espionage. They learn about the various departments within the agency, such as the theft division responsible for break-ins and wiretaps, and the liaison division that manages relationships with foreign intelligence services. Guest lecturers recount past operations, providing the cadets with a sense of lineage. They hear first-hand accounts of the theft of the plans for the Mirage jet fighter and the intricate smuggling of Jews from hostile countries. However, the romantic image of the agency begins to fracture slightly for Victor. He witnesses the pettiness and internal politics of the organization. He sees how instructors humiliate cadets during critiques, tearing down their confidence to rebuild them in the agency's mold. He notes the arrogance of the system, which believes itself to be above the law. The physical aspect of the training is equally demanding. The cadets undergo weapons training, firing thousands of rounds from pistols and submachine guns. They learn to shoot instinctively, drawing from concealed holsters and firing at moving targets. They practice contact drills, simulating street encounters where they must eliminate a threat and vanish into the crowd. The instruction is cold and efficient. They are taught to shoot to kill, targeting the head to ensure immediate neutralization. Despite the physical and mental exhaustion, the cadets are constantly reminded of their elite status. They are given access to the agency's recreational facilities and are treated to high-quality meals. They are made to feel special, separate from the rest of society. This psychological conditioning is designed to ensure absolute loyalty. As the first phase of the training concludes, the cadets are introduced to the concept of recruitment, the core function of the case officer, or CATSA. They learn the theory of the hook, finding a vulnerability in a potential agent that can be exploited. They study the motivations that lead men to betray their countries: money, ideology, coercion, and ego. They analyze case files of successful recruitments, dissecting the steps taken to entrap a target. Victor and his fellow cadets are now fully immersed in the shadow world. They have shed their civilian habits and adopted the paranoid, calculating mindset of the spy. They operate with a sense of impunity, protected by the power of the state and the secrecy of their mission. They are ready to move from the classroom to the field, eager to test their skills in the real world. The first major turning point in Victor's journey arrives with his assignment to a specific training squad for advanced field exercises. He is no longer just a student absorbing lectures. He is an active participant in simulated operations that blur the line between exercise and reality. He is assigned to a safe house in Tel Aviv, operating under a new alias, and tasked with recruiting actual civilians as unwitting sources. This shift from passive learning to active manipulation marks his irreversible entry into the operational life of the agency. He is now a practitioner of the art of deception, fully committed to a path that will distance him from his former self and eventually lead him to question the very moral foundation of the organization he has fought so hard to join. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow military enthusiasts. Alright, let's get back to it. With the transition from classroom theory to operational reality, Victor enters the rookie phase of his training, assigned to a safe house in the suburbs of Tel Aviv. He and his small team of fellow trainees are tasked with maintaining the apartment as a fully functioning clandestine station. They must construct hidden compartments for their documents, establish rigorous counter-surveillance routines, and invent elaborate cover stories to explain their presence to neighbors. The atmosphere is one of high-stakes role-playing, where a single slip in protocol could lead to expulsion from the program. The instructors issue live assignments designed to test the trainees' ability to infiltrate the lives of real targets. Victor is assigned to investigate a prominent figure named Mike Harari, a former senior intelligence officer now operating as a private businessman with high-level connections. The objective is to gather intelligence and create a plausible pretext for a business relationship. Victor conducts surveillance on Harari's residence and discovers a diplomatic vehicle, leading him to a shipping company office where he learns of Harari's role as an honorary diplomat for Panama. Using a cover identity as a Canadian investor interested in establishing a pearl farming enterprise in the Red Sea, Victor secures a meeting at the Panamanian embassy. He presents a sophisticated business plan, leveraging his research into aquaculture to maintain the ruse. However, the meeting takes a sharp turn when Harari, rather than discussing pearls, hints at the possibility of illicit transactions, suggesting that in Panama, money can buy anything. He challenges Victor to produce his passport, a document Victor has deliberately left behind to avoid identifying himself. Harari abruptly ends the meeting, suspicious of the encounter. That night, the training exercise escalates into a simulated crisis. Police raid the safe house, arresting the trainees and subjecting them to harsh interrogation to test their resistance. Following his release, Victor is summoned by the head of the academy. Harari has complained, accusing Victor of unprofessional conduct and fabricating the meeting's details. Victor produces a concealed recording of the conversation, vindicating himself and proving that Harari had indeed solicited bribes. The incident earns Victor praise for his tradecraft but plants a seed of disillusionment regarding the integrity of the organization's revered figures. Following the conclusion of the rookie phase in March 1984, Victor is assigned to a rotation through various headquarters departments to gain a broader understanding of the agency's functions. He begins in the research division, analyzing political and economic data from hostile neighbors. He tracks the construction of oil pipelines and monitors the movements of foreign fleets, gaining insight into the vast, silent war of information that underpins the state's security. He is soon transferred to the Liaison Department, a critical unit responsible for maintaining clandestine relationships with countries that do not have formal diplomatic ties with Israel. Here, the geopolitical cynicism of the agency becomes starkly apparent. Victor is placed in the section dealing with the Far East and Africa, where he works under a senior officer named Amy Yar. The department functions as a hub for international arms deals, facilitating the sale of military hardware to regimes regardless of their political standing, provided it serves the agency's strategic or financial interests. Victor is assigned to chaperone a delegation of military officers from Sri Lanka. The island nation is embroiled in a bitter ethnic conflict between the Sinhalese majority and the Tamil minority. Victor learns that the agency is playing a duplicitous game, training and arming both sides of the civil war simultaneously. He escorts the Sinhalese officers to military bases and defense contractors, helping them purchase patrol boats and radar systems designed to intercept insurgent vessels. At the same time, another officer in the department is handling a group of Tamil insurgents, training them in guerrilla warfare and naval sabotage techniques at a different base. The two groups are kept separate by a precarious scheduling dance, ensuring they never cross paths while in Israel. On one occasion, a logistical error nearly brings the opposing factions face-to-face during a training run, a disaster narrowly averted by the quick thinking of the instructors. The realization that the agency is fueling a foreign war for profit and leverage shocks Victor, but his superiors dismiss his moral qualms as naivety, emphasizing that the revenue and influence gained are vital for the state's survival. During this period, the agency is also deeply involved in a massive, covert effort to rescue Ethiopian Jews from famine-stricken refugee camps in Sudan. Known as Operation Moses, the mission involves a complex logistical network. To facilitate the extraction, the agency establishes a holiday diving resort on the Red Sea coast of Sudan. The resort, staffed by undercover operatives, serves as a front for the operation. By day, they host European tourists and diplomats, offering diving lessons and desert excursions. By night, they use the resort's vehicles and boats to transport refugees from the camps to waiting naval vessels or makeshift desert airstrips. The operation is a triumph of daring and ingenuity. Israeli transport planes land in the dark heart of the Sudanese desert, guided by infrared beacons, to airlift thousands of refugees to safety. The operatives navigate hostile territory, bribe local officials, and manage the immense physical and emotional toll of moving traumatized populations. The resort itself becomes a profitable enterprise, its cover so effective that it garners praise from the unsuspecting Sudanese tourism ministry. However, the operation is eventually compromised by a leak to the press, forcing the operatives to evacuate the resort overnight, leaving behind a fully functioning hotel and baffled guests. In late 1984, Victor returns to the academy for the Advanced Case Officer course, the final and most rigorous stage of his training. The curriculum focuses on the recruitment and handling of agents, the core skill of human intelligence. The trainees are subjected to intense psychological pressure, their every move scrutinized by instructors who seek to break down their personalities and rebuild them in the agency's image. The cohort is joined by new trainees, and the social dynamic within the group becomes increasingly toxic. The competitive atmosphere fosters betrayal and deceit among the students. In one disturbing incident, a fellow trainee invites Victor to his apartment and shows him a videotape. The tape depicts the trainee having sexual relations with a woman who is known to be part of the security surveillance team used in their exercises. The trainee reveals that he is blackmailing the woman to obtain advanced knowledge of surveillance schedules, giving him an unfair advantage in the course. He then makes an unwanted sexual advance toward Victor. Enraged and disgusted, Victor reports the incident to the course commander, expecting immediate disciplinary action. Instead, he is told to forget the matter. The trainee is protected by powerful connections within the organization, and the complaint is buried. The incident reinforces Victor's growing perception that the agency is rife with nepotism and moral corruption, where personal loyalty to the family outweighs ethical conduct. The moral rot is further evidenced by the behavior of other colleagues. One officer uses his skills in photography and access to police databases to run a private extortion racket, photographing couples in compromising positions on secluded beaches and demanding payment for the negatives. Rather than being punished, he is reprimanded only lightly, his initiative viewed with a twisted sort of approval. The disillusionment culminates during a night duty at the academy. Victor and his friends observe a party taking place at the swimming pool, attended by the agency's senior leadership. Looking down from a darkened window, they witness a scene of debauchery, with high-ranking officials and their subordinates engaging in a drunken orgy. The sight of the men he is trained to revere behaving with such abandon shatters the last remnants of Victor's idealistic image of the organization. He realizes that the elite fraternity he has fought to join is governed not by Spartan discipline, but by hedonism and arrogance. Despite these internal conflicts, the training continues with relentless intensity. The cadets learn the mechanics of complex operations, studying past successes and failures. They analyze the Belgian table operation, a classic example of creative bugging. In that case, operatives intercepted a shipment of furniture destined for a high-ranking Syrian official. They replaced a luxurious table with a replica containing a sophisticated listening device, allowing the agency to eavesdrop on sensitive conversations in Damascus for years. They also study the hairpiece operation, a mission to assassinate a Palestinian target in Europe. The case study highlights the agency's reach and its willingness to use lethal force. The instructors emphasize the necessity of cold detachment, teaching the cadets to view targets not as human beings but as objectives to be neutralized. The training includes practical exercises in breaking and entering, safe cracking, and the fabrication of documents. Victor learns to move through borders seamlessly, to assume new identities at a moment's notice, and to manipulate strangers into doing his bidding. As the course nears its conclusion in late 1985, the trainees are deployed on final field exercises. Victor is sent to Europe to practice recruiting civilians. In one scenario, he befriends a businessman in a hotel lobby, using a shared interest in chess as an opening. He cultivates the relationship over days, slowly drawing the man into a web of obligation and shared secrets. The exercise demonstrates the terrifying ease with which a skilled operative can subvert an ordinary life. Victor graduates from the course and is formally inducted as a case officer, or CATSA. He is assigned to the stations department, where he acts as a jumper, an operative based in headquarters who is deployed abroad for specific, short-term missions. His first major assignment involves the transfer of a large shipment of cargo to Panama. The operation is run in conjunction with Mike Harari, the former operative Victor had encountered during his training. The cargo is loaded onto Israeli transport planes, but the nature of the shipment arouses Victor's suspicions. He discovers that the crates contain not military supplies, but narcotics. The agency is facilitating a drug smuggling operation to fund its off-the-books activities and to curry favor with the Panamanian regime. Victor confronts his superiors, registering a formal complaint about the agency's involvement in drug trafficking. He argues that such activities betray the state's values and endanger its standing. His protest is met with hostility. He is branded a troublemaker, a man who does not understand the big picture. The complaint is dismissed, and he is warned that his career is in jeopardy if he continues to question orders. The tension between Victor and the agency hierarchy reaches a breaking point. He is marginalized within the department, given menial tasks, and isolated from his peers. However, the agency has one final use for him. In early 1986, a crisis develops involving a group of high-ranking Palestinian officials who are expected to travel by private jet from Libya to Syria. The agency plans to intercept the jet and capture the leaders. Victor is ordered to travel to Cyprus. His mission is ostensibly to act as a lookout and communications relay for the interception operation. He is to monitor the air traffic and maritime movements, awaiting a coded signal that the targets have boarded the plane. He arrives in Cyprus, checking into a hotel overlooking the harbor. He adopts the cover of a businessman, but his mind is heavy with the knowledge of the agency's corruption and his own precarious position. While waiting for the signal, Victor encounters a Palestinian businessman in the hotel bar. Through conversation, he learns that the Palestinian officials are aware of the Israeli surveillance. They have engaged in a deception of their own, leaking false travel plans to lure the Israelis into a trap. The officials do not intend to be on the jet. Instead, they have loaded it with low-level functionaries and invalids to embarrass Israel if the plane is forced down. Victor realizes the operation is a setup. He attempts to warn headquarters, frantically trying to reach his superiors to call off the interception. His warnings are ignored or blocked by the rigid bureaucracy and the personal animosity of his commanders. He is told to stick to his orders and stop interfering. The coded signal arrives, indicating that the targets have allegedly taken flight. Victor relays the confirmation as ordered, knowing that the intelligence is flawed. The Israeli Air Force intercepts the jet and forces it to land in Israel. When the plane is boarded, the elite commandos find not the terrorist leaders they expect, but a group of frightened civilians and minor officials. The operation is a humiliating public relations disaster for Israel, drawing international condemnation. Victor returns to Israel to find himself scapegoated for the failure. His attempts to warn the agency are erased from the official record, and he is accused of negligence and poor judgment. He realizes that he has been set up to take the fall, a convenient victim for a leadership unwilling to admit its own arrogance. The dream of serving his country has turned into a nightmare of betrayal. Summoned to a meeting with the administrative heads, Victor is presented with a separation package. He is effectively fired, his security clearance revoked. The agency tries to force him to sign a non-disclosure agreement that would legally bind him to silence forever, stripping him of his right to defend his reputation. He refuses to sign, walking out of the headquarters for the last time. He returns home to his wife, shattering the illusion of the secret life they had built. But the agency is not finished with him. He begins to notice surveillance teams tracking his movements. His phone is tapped, and his friends in the military are warned to stay away from him. The pressure mounts as the agency tries to intimidate him into submission, fearing that he knows too much about their incompetence and corruption. Victor realizes that he is no longer safe in Israel. The organization he once idolized now views him as a threat. He makes the agonizing decision to flee the country with his family. He quietly sells his belongings, liquidates his assets, and makes plans to leave for North America, using the very tradecraft he learned at the academy to evade the surveillance teams watching his house. The middle act of his journey concludes with Victor standing in the ruins of his career, stripped of his rank and his cause, preparing to become a fugitive from the very people he swore to protect. The machinery of the state, once his shield, has now turned its sights on him. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, Operation Zero. Don't forget to hit like and share this with fellow military enthusiasts. Alright, let's get back to it. Victor lands in North America, a man without a country, stripped of the identity and purpose that have defined his adult life. He moves through the unfamiliar landscape of exile, acutely aware that he has crossed a line from which there is no return. The silence of his former life is replaced by a deafening paranoia. He knows the reach of the agency better than anyone. He knows that the family does not forgive those who walk away, especially those who carry its darkest secrets in their heads. He settles into a precarious existence, constantly checking his rearview mirror, monitoring his phone line for the telltale clicks of a tap, and watching parked cars for the silhouette of a surveillance team. The psychological pressure is a weapon he once wielded against others. Now, it is turned against him. Back in Israel, the machinery of the state continues to grind forward, indifferent to the loss of one conscience-stricken officer. The agency's recklessness, which drove Victor away, begins to manifest on the global stage with devastating consequences. In late 1985, the fragile relationship between Israel and its most vital ally, the United States, is shaken by the arrest of Jonathan Pollard. Pollard, a naval intelligence analyst, is caught passing thousands of classified documents to Israeli handlers. The agency publicly distances itself from the affair, claiming it was a rogue operation run by a separate scientific bureau. However, the tradecraft bears the unmistakable signature of the agency's super-secret division known as AL. This unit, whose very existence is denied even within the general headquarters, operates solely within the borders of the United States. Unlike other stations that rely on diplomatic immunity, AL operatives work under deep cover, often posing as American citizens, a violation of the cardinal rule against spying on a friendly host nation. They target senators, congressional aides, and defense contractors, treating Washington and New York as open hunting grounds. The Pollard exposure forces the Israeli government into a humiliating diplomatic apology, but behind closed doors, the infrastructure of espionage remains intact, the players merely reshuffled to wait out the political storm. While the dust settles on the Pollard scandal, the agency becomes deeply enmeshed in a geopolitical scheme that will eventually engulf the American presidency. The catalyst is the desperate plight of Western hostages held in Lebanon. Following the kidnapping and brutal murder of the CIA station chief in Beirut, the American intelligence community is frantic for leads. They turn to the agency for help, requesting specific intelligence on the location of other captives. The agency's leadership, still smarting from perceived slights and driven by arrogance, chooses to withhold critical information. They possess detailed knowledge of the hostage networks but refuse to share it fully, offering only vague generalities and outdated files. They demand a formal request from the highest levels of the American government, using the lives of the hostages as leverage to extract political favors. This calculated obstructionism forces the Americans to seek alternative channels, driving them into the arms of dubious intermediaries and setting the stage for the Iran-contra affair. The agency seizes upon the American desperation to orchestrate a complex triangle of arms sales. They act as the broker between the United States and the radical regime in Iran, a sworn enemy of both nations. The logic is purely transactional. Sell American weapons to Tehran to fund the war against Iraq, use the influence to secure the release of hostages in Lebanon, and skim the profits to finance off-the-books operations. The point man for this operation is Amiram Nir, the Prime Minister's advisor on counterterrorism. Nir is a shadowy figure, ambitious and ruthless, who moves easily between the worlds of politics and espionage. He establishes a rapport with Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North of the American National Security Council, convincing him that the moderates in Tehran can be cultivated through arms shipments. To facilitate the deal, the agency employs a network of private arms dealers and financiers. They bring in Manouker Ghorbanifar, an Iranian expatriate with a reputation as a fabricator, to act as the middleman. To bridge the financial gap, since the Iranians refuse to pay until the weapons arrive, and the Americans refuse to ship until they are paid, the agency taps Adnan Khashoggi, a Saudi billionaire and longtime agency asset. Khashoggi puts up millions of dollars in bridge loans to grease the wheels of the transaction. Throughout 1986, plane loads of TOW anti-tank missiles and Hawk anti-aircraft spare parts flow from Israeli stockpiles to Tehran. The logistics are handled with the agency's trademark efficiency. Planes are repainted, flight plans are falsified, and crates are mislabeled. The profits generated are diverted to fund the Contras in Nicaragua, a secret war that the American Congress has explicitly forbidden the administration to support. The operation reaches its zenith in July 1986, when Nir travels to Jerusalem to brief the visiting American vice president. In a private meeting at the King David Hotel, Nir outlines the scope of the clandestine relationship with Iran. He argues that dealing with the radicals is the only way to achieve results, dismissing the moderates as ineffective. He frames the arms sales not as a breach of policy, but as a strategic necessity, a way to bring the hostages home and secure a foothold in a hostile region. The vice president listens, and the machinery of the deal grinds on, fueled by the agency's assurance that they can control the outcome. However, the house of cards begins to collapse in late 1986. A Lebanese newspaper exposes the arms for hostages deal, triggering a political firestorm in Washington. Investigations are launched, and the intricate web of lies begins to unravel. The agency scrambles to contain the damage, destroying documents and silencing witnesses. The focus turns to Amiram Nir, the man who knows where all the bodies are buried. Meir becomes a liability. As the American investigations deepen, threatening to implicate the highest levels of the Israeli government, Meir's potential testimony looms as a catastrophic threat. Then, in November 1988, reports emerge that Meir has been killed in the crash of a small chartered plane in a remote region of Mexico. The official story is that he was there on private business, inspecting avocado crops under an alias. The circumstances of the crash are suspicious. The body is identified hastily by an associate, and conflicting reports circulate about the passengers. In the intelligence community, the convenient death of a man who knows too much is viewed with deep skepticism. Many believe Meir has been given a new face and a new life in exchange for his silence, ghosted away to a secure location while the world believes him dead. While the agency plays these high-stakes games of international intrigue, a far more dangerous threat is brewing in its own backyard. For years, the agency has focused its resources on external enemies: the PLO in Tunis, the Syrians in the Golan, the Iranians in Tehran. They have neglected the simmering rage of the Palestinian population in the occupied territories of the West Bank and Gaza. The leadership views the occupation as a static management problem, one that can be controlled through surveillance, checkpoints, and the occasional show of force. They fail to see the human explosion that is about to occur. The spark ignites on December 8, 1987. An Israeli army transport truck collides with a line of cars carrying Palestinian laborers in the Gaza Strip. 4 Palestinians are killed. Rumors spread instantly through the refugee camps that the collision was intentional, an act of retaliation for a recent stabbing. The funerals turn into mass demonstrations. For the first time in decades, the fear that has kept the population in check evaporates. Young Palestinians, armed only with stones and Molotov cocktails, pour into the streets to confront the Israeli army. They block roads with burning tires and erect barricades. The soldiers, trained for high-intensity tank warfare against conventional armies, are unprepared for riot control. They respond with confusion and excessive force. Tear gas and rubber bullets give way to live ammunition. The first deaths fuel the anger, and the riots spread from Gaza to the West Bank, engulfing the refugee camps and the cities. The Intifada has begun. It is a popular uprising, a spontaneous rejection of the status quo that catches the agency completely off guard. The intelligence assessments had predicted apathy and resignation. Instead, the state faces a full-scale civilian rebellion. The agency's network of informants, so effective at tracking terrorist cells, is useless against a mass movement of angry teenagers. There is no central command to decapitate, no secret frequency to monitor. The government's response is brutal. The defense minister orders a policy of force, might, and beatings to break the will of the rioters. Television cameras capture images that shock the world. Soldiers holding down unarmed youths and smashing their limbs with rocks and clubs. Hospitals raided by troops dragging wounded patients from their beds. Entire villages placed under curfew and cut off from food and water. The agency watches as the moral standing of the state disintegrates. The occupation, once justified as a security buffer, transforms into an ugly war of attrition against a civilian population. The violence radicalizes a new generation of Palestinians and divides Israeli society. The economy suffers as reservists are pulled from their jobs to patrol the Kasbahs, chasing children through alleyways. By 1988, the PLO leadership in exile, sensing the shift in history, moves to capitalize on the uprising. In a landmark meeting in Algiers, the Palestinian National Council declares independence and, for the first time, implicitly recognizes Israel's right to exist by accepting UN resolutions. The agency, entrenched in its dogma that the PLO is a terrorist organization that can never be a partner for peace, dismisses the move as a trick. They advise the government to reject any dialogue, ensuring that the cycle of violence continues. The climax of the narrative finds the agency trapped in a prison of its own making. It has won tactical victories, assassinating leaders, blowing up reactors, stealing technology, but it has suffered a strategic defeat of the soul. The megalomania that drove the decision-making has led to isolation. The agency believes it is the only guarantor of the state's survival, yet its actions have eroded the very values the state was founded to uphold. Victor watches these events unfold from afar, his warnings vindicated but his heart heavy. He sees the AL unit continuing its operations in America, unchastened by the Pollard affair, treating an ally as a target. He sees the failure to predict the Intifada as the ultimate indictment of an intelligence service that has lost touch with reality, obsessed with the game of spies while missing the human truth on the ground. The denouement offers no easy resolution. The agency remains a powerful, autonomous force, answerable to no one, driving the state's policy from the shadows. The peace that was promised remains elusive, sabotaged by the very people charged with securing it. The story closes on a note of chilling realization that the greatest threat to the nation may not be the armies massing on its borders, but the unchecked power of the guardians within. The story ends with the somber understanding that the agency, designed to be a shield, has become a sword that cuts both ways, leaving deep, self-inflicted wounds that may never heal.